How often do we ignore the dark shadow of domestic violence lurking in our society, a shadow that exists in every corner of the world, casting a pall over countless lives? Domestic violence, an unspoken horror that seeps into homes, corroding relationships and shattering lives. It's a universal malady, a silent epidemic that transcends borders, cultures, and socioeconomic classes. Yet it's often overlooked, dismissed as a private matter, obscured by the walls of homes and the silence of victims. In our global society, 1 in 3 women experiences physical or sexual violence, most frequently by an intimate partner. But these figures only hint at the true magnitude of the problem. Countless incidents go unreported, buried under layers of fear, shame, and societal pressure. The victims, often women and children, are left to nurse their wounds in silence, their voices unheard, their stories untold. In many societies, traditional gender roles and patriarchal norms further fuel this crisis, providing a breeding ground for domestic abuse. These norms perpetuate the idea that men have the right to control or discipline women, leading to an alarming acceptance of violence against women. It's a cycle that breeds in silence, perpetuated by the very structures meant to protect us. Yet every so often, a case comes to light that shakes us from our complacency, forcing us to confront this dark reality. A case so shocking, so brutal that it tears down the veil of silence and indifference, demanding our attention, our outrage, and our action. In today's discussion, we delve into a chilling case that brought this issue to light. A case that echoed across borders, igniting conversations, sparking debates, and challenging long-held beliefs about domestic violence and gender equality. A case that forces us to ask, how many more lives will be lost before we take decisive action against domestic violence? The incident involves Kuandyk Bishimbayev, a former Kazakh minister, and his wife, Saltanat Nukenova. A chilling tale of domestic violence that ended in a fatal tragedy. The events unfolded in a restaurant owned by a relative of Bishimbayev. The couple had spent nearly an entire day and the preceding night at this location. Saltanat, only 31 years old, was found lifeless in November of the previous year. Hours before her death, she had been rendered unconscious. The court was later presented with an 8-hour-long surveillance footage that depicted the harrowing abuse she endured at the hands of her husband. Bishimbayev, 44 at the time, can be seen in the footage assaulting Saltanat repeatedly, kicking and punching her without mercy. The violence escalated as he dragged her by her hair into a room devoid of any cameras. A desperate attempt to escape led Saltanat to the toilet where she sought refuge. Bishimbayev, however, broke down the door, dragged her out, and resumed his brutal assault. It was at this point that Saltanat lost consciousness, as stated by the prosecutor during the trial. Lying unconscious and covered in her own blood, Saltanat's fate was left in the hands of a fortune teller whom Bishimbayev had called. The fortune teller assured him that Saltanat would be fine, but reality painted a different picture. It took 12 hours for an ambulance to arrive, and by then it was too late. Saltanat was declared dead at the scene due to brain trauma, as confirmed by a coroner's report. Her body bore the marks of the violent encounter, with a broken nasal bone and multiple bruises on her face, head, arms, and hands. The horrifying circumstances of Saltanat's death have captivated the nation. The incident has sparked a significant debate about gender equality and domestic violence, with many fearing that the wealthy and influential Bishimbayev might escape proper punishment. As we delve deeper into this case, we will examine the trial and the public response to this shocking incident. The trial, live-streamed on social media, has sparked widespread attention and debate. This case has been a grim spectacle, with the courtroom serving as a stage for a narrative that has gripped the nation. The trial proceedings have been a meticulous dissection of the tragic events that unfolded on that fateful day. The prosecution presented a chilling 8-hour-long surveillance footage showing the former minister, Kuandyk Bishimbayev, brutally assaulting his wife, Saltanat Nukenova. The footage bore witness to the horrendous act, with Bishimbayev seen repeatedly kicking and punching Saltanat. The visual evidence of the violence inflicted was so severe that it led to an unconscious Saltanat being dragged by her hair into a room devoid of cameras. The prosecutor described the horrific scene. When she tried to escape by hiding in the toilet, Bishimbayev broke down the door, pulled her out, and continued beating her. He grabbed her by the throat after dragging her out of the toilet. This is when she lost consciousness. The words echoed in the courtroom, painting a gut-wrenching picture of the brutality Saltanat endured. In response to this overwhelming evidence, Bishimbayev admitted guilt but denied acting with exceptional cruelty. However, the coroner's report, detailing the fatal brain trauma, broken nasal bone, and multiple bruises on her face, head, arms, and hands, contradicted his claim. The case has stirred public outrage, with many viewing Bishimbayev as a symbol of the country's wealthy ruling elite who may, even if found guilty, escape proper punishment. The trial has become a litmus test of President Kassym-Jomart Tokayev's promise to build a fairer, more equitable society. The case has ignited a conversation about gender equality and domestic violence. This trial, played out in the public eye, has exposed the systemic issues of gender-based violence and the desperate need for legal reforms to protect victims. The public outcry has led to new legislation criminalizing violence against women and children, a significant step towards change. However, the question lingers. Will this legislation provide adequate protection for victims of domestic violence? Kuandyk Bishimbayev, a man of power and influence, now stands accused. A name that was once associated with political prowess and economic strategy is now synonymous with brutality and violence. Bishimbayev, a former economy minister, was a significant figure in Kazakhstan's political landscape, steering the nation's economy amidst global challenges. His career, however, has been marred by allegations of corruption and now an unthinkable act of violence. Delving into Bishimbayev's past, we find a trail of questionable actions and dubious decisions. In 2017, he was arrested on bribery charges, a blot on his career that hinted at a darker side to this political figure. Despite the severity of the charges, Bishimbayev was sentenced to 10 years in prison but walked free after less than 3 years behind bars, thanks to an amnesty and parole. This incident raised eyebrows and left many wondering about the extent of his influence and the reach of his power. Today, Bishimbayev faces more serious charges, ones that could potentially result in a 20-year prison sentence. Accused of torturing and murdering his wife with extreme violence, the former minister has been thrust into the spotlight, not for his political acumen, but for his monstrous actions. The chilling surveillance footage of him brutally beating his wife has sent shockwaves across the nation and beyond, painting a picture of a man capable of horrific violence. The trial, live-streamed on social media, has gripped public attention, igniting a debate about gender equality and domestic violence. Many Kazakhs see Bishimbayev as a typical member of the country's wealthy ruling elite and fear that he might somehow escape proper punishment, as was the case with his previous conviction. This perception has fueled public outrage and intensified the scrutiny on the proceedings of the trial. Bishimbayev, once a respected minister, now stands as a symbol of the systemic issues plaguing Kazakhstan's society. His fall from grace has exposed the stark reality of gender-based violence and the urgent need for legal reforms to protect victims. As the trial unfolds, the world watches, waiting to see if justice will be served or if Bishimbayev will once again wield his influence to evade punishment. The question remains, will justice be served? The public's response to this case has been one of outrage and demand for change. The trial, streamed live on social media platforms, has gripped the nation and sparked a wave of public discourse. The horrifying details of Saltanat Nukenova's death have brought the issue of domestic violence into the spotlight, sparking a national and international outcry. In the streets and on the internet, people are calling for justice, not just for Saltanat, but for all victims of domestic violence. Discussions on social media platforms have exposed the prevalence of domestic abuse in the country, challenging traditional gender roles and demanding change. The hashtags #JusticeForSaltanat and #EndDomesticViolence have trended across multiple platforms, amplifying the call for action. The public outrage has not gone unnoticed. The case has spurred the government into action, leading to the introduction of new legislation criminalizing violence against women and children. This is a substantial step forward, though some critics argue it still falls short of providing adequate protection. The case has also struck a chord beyond Kazakhstan's borders. It resonated in Russia, where domestic violence laws have faced criticism, and it has highlighted the global issue of intimate partner violence. The world watches as Kazakhstan grapples with this case and its implications. The anger and demand for change that this case has inspired is a stark reminder of the urgent need for legal and societal reforms. The trial of Kuandyk Bishimbayev has become more than just a murder case. It's a litmus test for the nation's commitment to justice, gender equality, and its fight against domestic violence. The public's voice is clear. They demand justice, they demand change, and they will not be silenced. As the trial continues, the world watches and waits to see if these demands will be met. The case has become a symbol of the fight against domestic violence in Kazakhstan. The implications of this case reach far beyond the borders of Kazakhstan. It has managed to spotlight the pressing issue of domestic violence, not just in Kazakhstan, but worldwide. In a world where 1 in every 3 women experiences physical or sexual violence, mostly by an intimate partner, it's high time we take a deeper look at this systemic problem. This case has sparked a crucial conversation about traditional gender roles and the prevalence of domestic abuse. It has exposed the systemic issues of gender-based violence, a problem that is not confined to any one country or culture, but is unfortunately a global issue. The discussions that have sprung from this case emphasize the urgent need for legal reforms to protect victims of such violence. The public outcry following this case has led to new legislation criminalizing violence against women and children in Kazakhstan. However, some critics argue that it falls short of providing adequate protection. The case serves as a stark reminder that laws alone are not enough. There needs to be a cultural shift, a change in attitudes, and an end to the silence surrounding domestic violence. The case has also resonated in Russia, where domestic violence laws have faced criticism, and in Turkey, where a series of videos by a convicted mob boss alleging serious crimes by prominent figures has revealed a crisis of confidence in institutions. It's a grim reminder that domestic violence is not just a private issue, but a public one that requires immediate attention and action. Moreover, the trial, being live-streamed on social media, has highlighted the power of technology in bringing such cases to light. It's an example of how social media can be used as a tool for justice, to expose wrongdoings and demand accountability. In conclusion, the implications of this case are far-reaching. It's a wake-up call for the global community to address the issue of domestic violence seriously. It underscores the need for stronger legal frameworks, societal change, and the importance of using technology for the cause of justice. As the trial continues, the world watches and waits. As we look to the future, it's clear that this case has the potential to enact significant change. The Bishimbayev trial has already set in motion a national conversation about domestic violence and gender equality, a conversation that could lead to important societal shifts. The public's response to this case has been immense, and it's evident that the people of Kazakhstan are ready for change. They are demanding justice not just for Saltanat Nukenova, but for all victims of domestic abuse. The trial has brought to light the systemic issues of gender-based violence and the desperate need for comprehensive legal reforms to protect victims. While the public outcry has led to new legislation criminalizing violence against women and children, critics argue that it falls short of providing adequate protection. However, the fact that such legislation has been passed at all is a step in the right direction. This case has also resonated beyond the borders of Kazakhstan, shedding light on the global issue of intimate partner violence. It's a stark reminder that domestic violence is not confined to one country or culture, but is a worldwide issue that needs to be addressed. What this case has shown is that no one, regardless of their societal status or wealth, should be immune from facing the consequences of their actions. The hope is that Bishimbayev's trial will set a precedent, showing that even those in positions of power can be held accountable. The hope is that the outrage sparked by this case will fuel a push for more comprehensive legal reforms, better protections for victims, and a shift in societal attitudes towards domestic violence. But change doesn't happen overnight. It requires persistent effort, continuous dialogue, and the collective will of a society to stand up against injustice. The hope is that this horrific incident will lead to a safer, more equitable society. The case of Kuandyk Bishimbayev and Saltanat Nukenova is a chilling reminder of the prevalence of domestic violence. Throughout this video, we have analyzed the events leading up to the tragic death of Saltanat Nukenova, a young woman whose life was brutally ended by her husband, former Kazakh minister Kuandyk Bishimbayev. We examined the unsettling hours of CCTV footage that captured this act of violence, and the trial that has since ensued, a public spectacle that has gripped the nation and the world. Bishimbayev's actions have sparked a national debate on domestic violence and gender equality, with many fearing that his status as part of Kazakhstan's wealthy elite may allow him to evade proper justice. This case has highlighted the systemic issues of gender-based violence and the urgent need for legal reforms to protect victims. It has led to new legislation criminalizing violence against women and children in Kazakhstan, although some critics argue that it falls short of providing adequate protection. We also discussed the public outcry following the incident, and the fear that Bishimbayev, even if found guilty, may somehow escape proper punishment, as he did with a previous conviction. This fear, shared by many Kazakhs, is a stark reflection of the lack of confidence in the country's justice system. Moreover, we explored the implications of this case on the wider society and the future of Kazakhstan, particularly in light of President Kassym-Jomart Tokayev's promise to build a fairer, more equitable society. This case serves as a litmus test of the president's commitment to his promise. As we continue to watch this case unfold, we are reminded of the crucial importance of addressing domestic violence in our society. It is a global issue that requires our collective attention and action, and no individual, regardless of their status or wealth, should be above the law. The memory of Saltanat Nukenova and victims like her deserves nothing less.